Okay, give people a minute to come on.
Sorry?
I'm just going to give people just a few. We just opened the call for listeners, so
Okay.
I'm just going to wait 30 seconds or so before officially introducing you.
No, so it's just...
So welcome everybody, or welcome back. I'll just start in like another few seconds. Hi, Gila. Yeah, guys, feel free to say hi. I wish you would say where you are, what your biggest questions and concerns are. I want to hear from you. We are a collective. People who care. Nancy from Boca Raton, Ali from Spain, Norman from Las Vegas, Deborah from Colorado, Jonathan from Alot, Tammy from Utah, Rosemary from the UK, Gal from California, Sue Lynn from Manitoba, California. Oh, Canada. Okay. Vancouver. Yeah, Maryland. Hi, Julie from Texas, Toronto, Manchester, England. Yeah, okay. So as people keep coming on, keep introducing yourselves, and I'm sure more people will keep coming on over the conversation. I'm very grateful and looking forward. I don't want to say excited because it's such crazy times. There's so many mixed feelings, but Rabbi Pinchus Winston, who is an expert in all kinds of matters, Torah, and particularly redemption. And the topic for this conversation is a moment of truth for all mankind. So just to briefly introduce Rabbi Winston, he lives in Telstone, Israel, which is near Jerusalem. He writes full-time on various topics of Torah philosophy with a special emphasis on redemption, which he aims to make very, very clear for people, as clear as possible, and aims that it should be on everyone's radar, as well as the role of the land of Israel in the redemption process and the future of humanity. I named this, welcome, Rabbi Winston, thank you for being with us. I named this summit, this mini summit, Prophecy, Israel and the Future of Mankind, because Israel is very central to the future of mankind. And I think that the world, whatever perspective each individual is taking, or each nation or whatever, I think that all eyes are on Israel right now, which is just strange, interesting, and prophetic. Certainly we're going through a lot here. And I guess I want to start by asking you, Rabbi Winston, just what is your perspective on things? Just, what is it that you want to share with us? What are you feeling? What are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are the prophecies saying? And we'll take it from there.
When I was a little boy, a long time ago, I remember watching the movie The Ten Commandments, which I think everyone's seen by now. Certainly been around for a long time. One of my favorite all-time movies. For the longest time, I thought that Charlton Heston actually was Moses. Disappointed he wasn't, but in the end. But I think, I don't remember I remember most of it, but I think one of the most telling scenes, for me, one of the most spectacular scenes, because I'm very big on this good versus evil thing. I think everybody is. It must be, because the movies make a fortune off of it. That's like a major theme in this day and age. It's always good versus evil, very good versus very evil. So obviously people argue the point whether it's nature versus nurture, but whatever it is, it certainly has overtaken mankind for thousands of years, and it remains to be, I think, the hottest theme to this. And I always love when good overcomes evil, because I always assume that I'm on the good side. I'm part of the good guys, but you never know. But and I just remember this one scene where they're by the Red Sea, or Reed Sea, depends how you call it. But there's Moses, and the Erev, the mixed multitude, the famous mixed multitude. Edgar G. Robinson, I believe, or I think he was Dawson. I don't know, but causing troubles again. Always a thorn in the side of the Jewish people. Once again, by the sea, the Egyptians are up in the hills, ready to pounce on them for his opportunity, and the sea is behind them, to their back. They have nowhere to go. They're trapped by the sea, and they start to complain to Moses. They start to yell at him and question him, and you took us all this way just to kill us by the sea. Classic sarcasm. by the sea there. And there weren't enough places to bury us in Egypt. They took us out here to bury us on the sea. It's like beautiful, like just like great a lot. And Moses stands there, and he just says stand still, be quiet, right? Because you've seen the Egyptians today for the last time, and and no one knows what's going to happen. No one knows, and we know the sea is going to split because we saw the movie before, right? But they don't know. In the Chumash, it's the first time no sea is split like this. Actually, it's not entirely true, but the sea has not really split like this before for them. And then, of course, everybody is silenced when the sea actually splits, right? And at that moment, like either you were like, well, you swallowed your words because you doubted and you complained, and here God had this miracle, and you thought it was an impossible situation, and it turns out there was a solution, and those people who trusted felt great because they trusted. They didn't know what was going to happen next, and they waited to see it. But he took us this far. The 10 plagues in Egypt were absolutely awesome, and we got out of Egypt, and that was deemed impossible in those days. And here we are, and 7 days later by the sea. So why not? Why? Obviously, God did not take us out to the sea to be drowned. You got to save money and kill us back in Egypt, but let the Egyptians do it for him. So they waited, and it was like this. Division. And you always find in life and history this division where you got the believers and the disbelievers, and the people who put themselves out there and say things they shouldn't say, and the ones who keep their mouth shut. And it's always like in every situation, every crisis, you have different types of people, but specifically, two types. And this is I found out much later on, much later on, that this actually is a very, very common theme all through history. This happens all the time. It depends how much you know, and what you believe, but it turns out that this is all that life really comes down to. We as a smooth journey, or we want it to be a smooth journey. I have my personal plans. I plan to grow up and get married and have a job and have family and learn Torah and do all these things. And then history, sometimes it cooperates, and other times it doesn't. I was having a great time dancing away this year on Simchat Torah, and history interrupted with a terrible, terrible, terrible crisis and catastrophe. And the truth is, I didn't even know at first. I didn't know until later on the day, because it was a Yantiv, it was a holiday, and it was Shabbat at the same time. And I didn't know the news. I just know I saw rockets in the sky that was above my own head. I could see what was going on.
You did. Wow.
But yeah, we were right there. And we actually had a siren during our at the end of our prayer, and we just sped up and finished as soon as possible and went home. But I didn't know the full extent of it until the holiday was over, and of course it was shocking, and nothing's been the same ever since. And history just interrupts, just like throws things at us, and that's the way most people live their life. They're living their own. Even the Jewish people who have Torah and ultimate goals and this idea of redemption and things like that. But for the most part, people have their own personal plans that they plan to carry out. And history, every once in a while just ruins everything for us. It just throws something at us, and a crisis. It could be a personal crisis. It could be a financial crisis. But that's the way people look at it, and that's actually the exact reverse of what's going on. It's the exact opposite what's going on. And if you don't know this, if you don't understand this, then you get caught up in it, and you make the mistake of saying the wrong things, and believing the wrong things, and making mistakes, making choices about how to proceed from that point on. Where history is what counts. That's all that there really is. We're like either main actors on the set, or secondary actors, or tertiary actors. We're like the different levels. But it's Shakespeare said all of life is a stage, and he was 100% correct. He just didn't understand to what extent that was true, and what it actually means from a godly perspective. He just meant that everyone's acting out their lives, and it's all one big ongoing play. But God has this master plan for creation, with which he began everything. Everything going on today was known at the beginning. It was planned from the very beginning. It's a surprise to us, because God didn't share all that information with us. He didn't tell us, he told us in general certain things. We have prophecies about the we like indications that something's going to happen at the end that's going to be very dramatic and maybe even catastrophic. But the actual details, about nations and peoples and events and things like that. So, we didn't know that this all was going to happen. So we're trying to live our lives, and there's quiet periods and there's loud periods, but they're all part of this master plan going back to creation. And we know that there's going to be a big celebration at the end, which we call the Messianic era. And it's actually only a preparatory stage for what's coming up after that, which is, first the resurrection of the dead, and then eventually will be called the world to come, or in Hebrew, Olam Haba. And we've been heading that way the entire time. Nothing has deviated. There's been no deviations. Nothing. It's not like God said, "Ooh, I didn't see that coming." I wanted to go this way, and I went that way. Oh, man's so tricky. He's always doing stuff that catches me. But no, there's no surprises by God. He saw it all. In fact, if anything, he's manipulating history to make us do the things that we do and act the way we act,
Right.
All for the sake of free will, all for the sake of having free will and using free will and making decisions and and taking responsibility as a partner with God in helping him, not because he needs our help, but because he's honored us with the opportunity to help him fulfill the plan for creation. And everybody is in a position to either be part of it or not part of it, to go with it or be rejected by it. And this is what you have to understand. At the sea, that's what God did. It's not that he brought us all the way to the sea, say, look what I can do. I can even split the sea. You saw my great things, my tricks and sound and light show back in Egypt, right? Watch this one. You never saw this before, did you? Right? And splits the sea. Nah, that's not the way it works by God. God doesn't have to show off anything. He can, if he wanted to really show off, he could scare us of our boots completely. It's not the way it works. He's doing it for us, for our benefit, to help us to become better people, to fulfill ourselves, and to do meaningful things with our lives, and our personal lives. What we had along the way. It's great if you can manage to get some stuff in there you like. It's fantastic, but it's like a CEO in a sense of a company. Right? He's got a personal life too, but he's at a company, and he's running that company. And that company, if it's a successful company, demands his time and attention. And almost everything he does is with that company. He can become a workaholic even. So he might take out some time to go on a vacation. He might take out some time to go play tennis in the course of a day, something like that. But overall, his mind is always on that, and that's his main thread in life. And the personal stuff is like, well, I'll fit it in over here. That's not good for family life necessarily, right? It can lead to divorce sometimes, but that's that's kind of like the way history is supposed to work as well. Now, having said that, right, then when God did the event at the sea, it was more like God saying, I'm doing this because I want to see who's with me and who's not with me. I want to see who buys into the master plan for creation and who doesn't. Because I want you to see for yourself the choice that the truth is, I already know where you're going to stand. Because God is above time, right? He's not the past, he's not the present, he's not the future. It's all one thing for him. So whatever choices we're going to make, he already knows about. So he's not proving to himself. When Abraham brought Isaac up as the sacrifice, God knew exactly what he was going to do, whether he'd carry through with it or not. But Abraham had to see for himself how far he was prepared to go to serve God. And that's what we call a test of life. So when God did the whole episode with the sea, he was basically saying, now we're going to see who has faith and who doesn't. Who trusts me because of what I did back in Egypt, and who still needs more proof, right? Because it's an indication of who you are and what you've accomplished with your life in the end. And this is particularly true when it comes to redemption. Particularly true. People don't realize it, right? There's all kinds of things going on in the world today, in general, but in response to what happened in Israel, almost a month ago, basically, and they don't realize that whatever happened, it's meant to reveal us to ourselves. It's a moment of truth. It's a moment of truth where we have to now, because you see, But over the last 10, 15, 20 years, and I think we spoke about this maybe the last time I was on, right? That there was a time when you could sit on the fence. There was a time you could literally, ignore society, ignore the big decisions going on, and just do your own thing because they didn't always affect you the same way. But in the last 10, 15, 20 years, events have been occurring in history that force people to make a decision. People are very opinionated. And there are other reasons too. Social media plays a major role. People think that social media is just technology, came into the market, came into the world, and it was just taking advantage of it. God made social media. He made it exactly when he did, exactly the way he did, so that it could be around now to push people to make decisions about where they stand with truth. And that's the bottom line, by the way. That's the whole thing. There is truth and there's falsehood. When it becomes gray, it becomes good versus evil, because good can be subjective and evil can be subjective. But truth is completely objective, and sheker, falsehood, is completely objective. They point out that before Adam ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he didn't know about good and evil. So it sounds like a good thing. You're supposed to, right? We teach our kids about good versus evil. We want our kids to grow up knowing that this is good, this is evil, to choose the good. So why is it such a negative thing? For us, it's a positive thing. Why was it a negative thing for Adam to do this? Because the difference is that our children begin with nothing. They don't know anything. So we teach them the difference between good and evil. But when Adam and Eve were created, they lived and existed on the level of truth and falsehood, black and white. And going down to good and evil is adding black paint to white paint to make gray. Right. That's where doubt is created. That's when you start having doubt. The nemesis of people is the nation called Amalek, right? In the Chumash, the Torah, in the same weekly reading, the sea splitting is the nation of Amalek attacks, and the rabbis point out that Amalek in numerical gematria, right, is numerology is 240, which is equal to the Hebrew word suffix, which means doubt. And that's what Amalek does. Whether he's actual people today or not, he's not. But the reality of Amalek is anytime people doubt the existence of God or doubt divine providence, doubt the Torah, for whatever reason, that's considered to be a function of Amalek.
Then what is the commandment at the time of redemption, to wipe out the memory of Amalek?
Wipe out all doubt of the reality of God. Wipe out all doubt. Get rid of all those things from your own personal mind. As Rashi explains, the commentary Rashi, the French commentator on the episode with Amalek, that Amalek, the main thing that Amalek does is he creates doubt in the minds of people. Everybody has a personal obligation. Jew and Gentile has a personal obligation to go after that doubt, to find it, first of all, because it's amazing how much doubt we can live with and not even know it.
Right.
Just
Till push comes to shove.
Yeah, it just shows up all of a sudden one day.
Whoops, there's a war.
Yeah, but you have to be human, right? Is to think, is to use your brain. We're told we use between 5 to 10% capacity of our brains. So what's with the other 90%? Well, some of you can use to think more deeply into life, to come to conclusions about truth. We're supposed to be truth seekers. And being a truth seeker requires a certain things, one of which is self-honesty. That's probably one of the most important traits a person can have and teach the children, self-honesty. Because if a person can lie to themselves, they can lie to anybody else, everybody else. You have to be able to face the music, as they say, no matter what it means. The truth has to be more important than you. More important than your own personal life, more important than your own personal dreams. The truth has to trump everything in the end, rise above it all. And then a person, when they have that, then it means that whenever they look at the world, they're going to see God, because that's what truth, is. People, to have free will alone, just to be able to have free will, you have to believe in absolute truth. You have to know it exists, because if you don't, everything's just an opinion. Everything's just an opinion.
You're brainwashed,
your opinion.
And you you have no choice.
Yeah,
no clarity of choice.
What are we going to compare it against? If there's no standard of truth, to compare what I'm thinking to, then all I have is my opinion versus your opinion. So you have your justification, and I have my justification, right? Russia thinks they're right. America thinks they're right. Hitler, Yamach Shema thought he was right in what he did. He had an ideology. He wasn't just a mass murderer. He was a mass murderer with an ideology. He was a social Darwinist. And he tried to make the world a better place from his perspective, modeling it after the animal world, the animal kingdom. So you have to believe in absolute truth. That's the number one thing. If you don't believe in it, you better take the time to search and find out what it is.
I mean, there is no source of absolute truth that I'm aware of in the universe except for the Torah, which is why I've thought for many, many years that the Torah is going to save us from destruction. It's the only thing that's going to save us from destruction. But in terms of feel free to disagree, but in terms of I wanted to ask you in terms of Amalek being doubt, but many people are saying that where we are now as Jewish people and good people, whoever feel part of this and aligned, that we need to actually create or conduct a physical war against Amalek, those who try to wipe out the people of God, the Torah, etc. And I wanted to ask you about that. And also, does that have a relationship with the war of Gog and Magog? What is the war of Gog and Magog?
It's like we have an analogy for almost every idea in Torah, and health is one of the best analogies we have. There are people. A doctor tells a person, we actually, even before you get to the point of any kind of illness, we already have all kinds of knowledge, information about what you should eat and how you should live your life in order to avoid sickness. And the whole point of illness or sickness or pain and things like that are to warn us that we're doing something wrong. The body's not being treated the way it should be treated. So a person can respond to that and realize this is the message and deal with it early. And it may be a simple thing. The dentist, for example, a sore tooth, right? So a dentist might just prescribe some type of rinse for your mouth. Just it's a certain biotic, and you just have to rinse, and that's it. Once a day when you're brushing your teeth, and you're done, you're finished. And if a person doesn't respond to that, then it might mean having to go into the dentist chair and have a cavity filled, right? And it might even mean, at some point, root canal or something, more serious stuff, or taking the tooth out. And we've all seen or experienced something like this in life. So theoretically, on paper at least, right, that it should be possible to defeat Amalek on paper, intellectually. How do we do this? Well, that's what it means to be an Or L'Goyim, a light unto the nations. The Jewish people were supposed to show the world. Because at one point you have to understand, this is something people don't realize today, but at one point the whole world believed in God, the Jewish God. They may have had other gods and idol worship and all that, but they did believe in God. Nebuchadnezzar, even the Gemara says, even Titus, himself, Josephus, who lived in the time of the Romans, that's very late in history, right? He wrote that you could still go to the area of Sodom and Gomorrah, where you could see a statue that was the wife of Lot. Wow. That became the pillar of salt. And Newton's right-hand man in the 1700s writes about this as he wants to go see for himself. So at one point in time, the whole world understood. Josephus says it was known in his time the Jews left Egypt miraculously. And he wasn't a religious Jew per se, or at all. He was a Roman. He became a Roman. Josephus Flavius, and he became a historian, one of the first to actually record history, as honestly as it was, more or less, as it was happening. And you read what he writes, antiquities and all that, and it's incredible. And Christianity, of course, built upon the fact that Judaism is true, and Islam as well. They're all built upon the fact that God talked to Moses at Mount Sinai. They just hold that they're the next one in line. But if anyone says that Judaism, God forbid, wasn't true, everything else, all the religions of the world disappear, just like that.
Right.
Which maybe what some people want, but that's not the truth. So at one point, everybody understood that. And if the Jewish people, again, theoretically, had taken advantage of that opportunity to concretize that understanding and belief in the proper way, as we were supposed to do, then maybe there'd be no need for any physical wars after that. We'd have solved the problem early enough, with intellectual. In fact, I'll just tell you, just on Shabbat alone, I was reading a very specific book on the end of days that I teach from, and it's based upon the Vilna Gaon's writings and the Ramchal, which is Rabbi Moshe Chametzato, what they wrote hundreds of years ago about what we can expect at the end of days. Amazing how accurate and how true so much information is. But the Vilna Gaon explains, because we're told by the rabbis in the Talmud that the final redemption will be much more spectacular than any other redemption we've ever experienced.
Right.
That it will make the other ones pale. And I'm thinking to myself, well, in those days they didn't have Hollywood and things like that, and blockbuster movies with spectacular, miraculous events, even though it's all fake, right? But that's our mindset. We're used to that. Like so, what's God can do whatever He wants, but how spectacular, spectacular. And interesting enough, I just happened to see on the Shabbat that he doesn't have to do those things anymore. He doesn't have to do those wonders to get our attention. He's going to put the knowledge of the truth into the head of every living individual at the end. And just to be able to see the truth so black and white, so clear, will be such an awesome experience. There's no movie or plague or whatever that could ever match the excitement that people are going to have when they actually experience that level of truth. Wow. It's going to be an awareness.
It's awakening. That's what people are calling awakening, the rise of the intuitive powers. And
we're not talking about the rise of intuitive powers. We're not talking about that.
We're talking about something much deeper
that we can do ourselves. It's a gift from God specifically. We're working towards it. You can see him moving. He's already been doing it anyhow for the longest time. He's moving towards that, us in that direction. For example, the technology alone has provided so much insight into how the physical world works that also has provided insight into how the spiritual world works, because the physical world was born from the spiritual world. So therefore, just like a child has the traits of its parent, likewise the physical world has the traits of the spiritual world, but in a physical context. So if we had time, I trained at the time, how just the equation E equals mc squared is actually extremely Kabbalistic idea. Einstein didn't know that at the time, but anybody who knows Kabbalah can show you how it is. And so you see that God has been nudging us through history, opening our minds and opening our eyes and showing us things as part of the preparation for what He's going to do at the end of days. And anybody who's left standing at the end, right, after whatever transition we have to go through, is going to basically have that awareness and a little sample of it, and I think this is also one of the reasons why the Torah includes this. But when Joseph is sold by his brothers down into slavery, right, and for he's gone for 22 years altogether. And when his brothers finally come down, they stand before him. They don't recognize him because he's grown up and he's got a beard and probably wearing makeup like all the other Egyptians, and he's acting not like a brother specifically. And when he finally says the two words, in English, three, but in Hebrew, Ani Yosef, and I am Joseph, they are shocked. They are so shocked. They can't believe. They're such smart, intelligent, wise individuals. And yet they completely missed the boat on history, completely missed the boat on Joseph, completely missed the boat on what God wanted, thinking the entire time that they were doing the truth. And it was so overwhelming that they saw nothing else but their own error. And they were speechless, right? That's a sample of what it's going to be like. When God, we can talk about it all we want. Just like people say, a prophecy once again. Well, God will talk to us, and they think about God talking to us like as if my neighbor calls me up on the phone and says, "Hi, what are you doing today?" It's like, no, I didn't understand. It's a natural thing for a human being to talk to another human being. But prophets, when they went into a state of prophecy, except for Moses, had to be put to sleep because their body went into convulsions during the prophecy. It was such an overwhelming experience. And even then, God had to filter the message so that they could handle it. It's beyond understanding. The question is, what's the price of admission? That's the question you have to ask yourself. You know, you
In
can say
general,
whatever
for humanity to this era. By the way, a bunch of
Everybody.
people asked about the book. What is the book? I don't want to forget to ask you.
It's in Hebrew. It's called Achris Kereshis. The end is like the beginning. If anybody wants more specific, you can buy it online. It's in Hebrew. It's not in English. It's a Hebrew book, and it's fantastic. If you read Hebrew, it is a fantastic work to learn. But it certainly should be translated at some point in time. But the question is, what's the price of admission? What do I have to be doing? Because you can say whatever you want, as people point out today with all the social media we have, that anybody can just voice an opinion. As they say, if you lie enough times, it becomes a truth. That's what's going on. There's just statements flying around and social media posting things that I'll give a fraction of the picture or even a incorrect version of the reality. Someone was just telling me he saw a broadcast from England about this huge, massive protest they had, and they interviewed two women who were part of the pro-Palestinian protest, and they had no idea, and they were told that Israel was even attacked. They thought that Israel just attacked Hamas, and that's why they were there. And how many people thought like that? It's like there's such either the knowledge is incomplete, or people are lying and say whatever they want. It's like that's the world today. That's the world today, and you can get away with it so easily for the longest time and find so many people who want to support you. I mean, it's the most shocking thing in the world for me personally.
Yes, it is.
Well, that after what happened on Simchat Torah this year, the atrocities, and they go one step even better than the Nazis. The Nazis try to hide it. They try to cover it up. These guys go ahead, they filmed it.
Right.
With cameras, and they posted it, and they made it available, and yet people who were shown this thing or told about it still denied it and still decided to make Israel the culprit and all this. And it's after I remember, I was here after the whole thing happened, and there was a brief period. I mean, there was world sympathy from the leaders of the countries, for a brief period of time, and we couldn't believe how within 2 weeks everything had turned around. Like, it's absolutely mind-boggling that people could do that. The only answer is because people already had the hatred. People already had the negativity. People already had the false information. People already were looking for an opportunity to be able to voice their opinions, and this just brought it up. Because if they weren't, they would have taken the time to find out the truth before expressing their opinion and then doing whatever they're going to do. That's not humane to do, the opposite. So obviously, it's bringing out things that were already there on one level. On the other level, of course, is all divine providence, all part of the preparatory, phase of Jewish history to prepare us for what's coming up next. And that's really the hard part. The hard part is that everything going on today and that will go on is outside the box for all of us. It's outside of our experience. We're not used to prophecies coming true, even though we witnessed them, right? Like the ingathering of the exiles, or to thousands of years.
So many.
But the big one, when the ingathering, we call kibbutz galus in Hebrew, the ingathering is been happening. It's actually phenomenally miraculous if you understand the history of it. Incredible, absolutely incredible, and evidence of the divinity of Torah, if you want to go that far as well. But it's happened in a way that people can. Well, that's natural.
Looks natural, right?
Okay, so it's impressive. I agree, it's impressive, but who says it's God doing it? It's a part of you can do that. But
so far, the war looks natural too. By the way,
yes, but at one point in time, it's not going to anymore. It's going to step over a line. And that's what we're working ourselves towards. In fact, we're much closer to it than people even know, because we go in stages. I was listening to an audio presentation once about a German who was older. It was an older man. He was young when the Holocaust took place, and he was explaining he was one of those who regretted what happened, and he was giving an interview, and he was explaining how it was that Germany could be taken into this phase of history that's so negative and really contrary to what a lot of Germans themselves wanted to do. And he said the changes came in increments. That's the main thing he said. The changes came in small increments. They purposely did that. And we saw them. but they were so small each time that it didn't seem worthwhile to make a big deal about it. He said, but after the whole thing had happened and we looked back at all the change, how dramatic it was, by then it was too late to do anything about it. And fear drove us, and that's how they got to that state, he said. And it's such a telling thing because it works both for good and bad. And God's been doing the same thing in a positive way with us. He's been changing. We want people to see the truth, and therefore it takes a huge, like they do in the movies, when they want like something big to happen, they make it massive that everybody can't disagree with it, a tornado or a massive earthquake, and it's got to be big for everyone to say, yes, we get it now, right? But that's not the way God's been working, because Hollywood does not care about free will. That's not the issue. They're not preparing people for the world to come. They're not preparing people for the Messianic era. They're just trying to make money off their movies. But God, on the other hand, he wants people to be part of the redemption process. He wants to give merit to people, because free will does matter to him, and the world to come is where he's taking us. So therefore, he does it in increments and gives people a chance to say, oh, that's interesting. What's that? Like Moses by the burning bush, right? God doesn't call it, hey, Moses, over here. It's God talking. Right? He doesn't do that. Moses, he sees a bush burning that's not being consumed. So what does he do? He doesn't go, oh, look at that. That must be God. Right? What other explanation could there be for the burning bush is not being consumed? Must be God. I'm going to talk to God. Right? He doesn't do that, because that's a curious sight. Let me take it out. Let me just take a look and see what's going on over there, because that's really interesting. It's fascinating. Make a science project, get a government grant, break it down. What's happened over here, right? And then when he comes over, so God about hi, it's me, right? Ooh, and then he falls in this. Why? Because he he wanted Moses to be prepared. He wanted Moses to have his free will. He wanted Moses to be able to stand up and talk to God as a human being, talking to his master, his creator, to be able to not be shocked into change. Because you know what happens when you're shocked into change? Later on, the shock wears off.
Last.
You desire, you lose your commitments.
Same thing when you're scared into change, by the way. I've been saying this for so long.
Exactly. So therefore, everything happens in increments. But the trouble is that the increments are so small that most people don't say, gee, that's interesting. I wonder why that's going on. Let me check it out and let me see if I can do anything about it. Right? But the people who are astute, people who are prepared, the people who have a redemption mentality, people who are interested in the truth, they see things, they pay attention. It makes an impression for two reasons. One, because they're sensitive, and two, because God says I can work with a person like that. That's a person I can talk to, someone who's prepared to listen. So, we're calling this a moment of truth, because that's what this is. This is not just history unfolding. This is not just about an attack that took place in Israel a month ago and about the world's response to it. And, it hasn't been about that for the last 30, 40 years, if not longer. This is about God saying to mankind as a whole, the Jewish people specifically, and mankind as a whole, who are you? What do you believe? How did you come to that conclusion? And where do you stand? That's what's going on right now. And the answer will either get you to the next stage of history or lock the door on you. One of the two.
Whoever's left standing, is that to you, is that the demarcation where you stand and what you believe gets you through? Yeah. Or is it something else? Yes. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, because that's really what a test is always all about. What's your connection to truth? Because when we use the word truth, by the way, we're really saying God.
Right.
It's one the same thing. You can't separate them. If you don't believe in God, you can't believe in truth. You don't believe in truth, you don't believe in God. Everything, again, just comes down to personal truths and personal opinions. And that changes, we see historically from moment to moment.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to, and if you're having problems with the existence of God, check it out, figure it out now. Because at some point in time, just imagine it, people who've invested their entire life based upon the belief that God does not exist, or at least if he exists, doesn't care. And all of a sudden, we have this massive, huge, incredible revelation where God says, here I am, I've always been here, and yes, I do care. You think Joseph's brothers had a problem? Mankind is like, I got it wrong. I got it wrong. like big time. So the door is closing. This is the time. This is the moment, and everybody in their own level. For the Jewish people, it's one type of test, more to do with emunah and bitachon, trust and faith in God, trusting God for the process, believing in His goodness, believing that He wants the best for His people, no matter what it looks like, hanging in there, staying with Him until the very end, because it's only at the end that things start to make sense. Only then, your mind and your heart, they're going to lie to you along the way. They're not prepared for this. Depends what you know. Depends how deep your knowledge goes. For a seasoned Kabbalist, nothing that happens is out of the question. Everything fits into the master plan for creation. They have no problem with that. The average person is not a master Kabbalist. Their knowledge is very shallow. They don't ask the good, important questions.
Also, I think this is very important to me, and I'm sure to other people as well. The whole idea of prophecy, that positive prophecies must come true, negative prophecies can, physically, positive prophecies have to come true on a physical level, negative prophecies can come true in this way, that way, or another way, as long as they have the impact that they're meant to have. So it sounds like the book, Achris Kireshis, and the whole idea of the end times replicating the original redemption.
Right.
How do you see all of that? How do you see the time frame? I know that you don't know, and nobody knows. You've said that. You said that to me before we started the call, and you said that during the call, that we're in a place that we don't know how to process it. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what it looks like. But what are the best ways? What are the things that we can do? What are the anticipate the intended result of the negative prophecies and try to implement that within ourselves and to help others do so without having to have the pain? Like you said, Amalek could have been potentially defeated without any war. So where we are now versus where we're going, where we have to end up, what is the best pathway?
Well, the most important thing is to know what God He wants from us and expects from us. For example, King David said in Psalms, he writes that you will get up and show mercy to the Jewish people because the appointed time will have come.
Right.
The redemption. And then he goes on to explain what we're supposed to do. He says, because you're certain, why will you have mercy? Because that's what we're after, right? Isn't that what we're after? Mercy?
Yes,
Isn't
very much so.
That's
much mercy.
God, do whatever you want. Just do me a favor, temper it with mercy, that I don't have to suffer any pain, right? Not emotionally.
I don't even want to be scared. I can't tolerate fear. It's like I'm not built for it.
Yeah, we all. That's a human thing. I don't think anybody. We don't mind fear if it's one that we choose. Skiing down a hill at 65.
Yeah, right.
We're driving. These guys driving the motorcycles on the highway here, 200 miles an hour. They choose to have this kind of a fear. It's the fears that we can't control or don't understand that shake us up.
Yeah.
And the pain that they might possibly cause. But he says, right, that your servants they want her stones and they cherish her dust. So on one level, it's talking about the temple. On one level, it's talking about the land of Israel itself. But ultimately speaking, it's talking about redemption. I once saw something that it just happens in life. You have a certain perspective. I learn Torah on a daily basis, thank God, and I'm like I increase my knowledge for this and that. But every once in a while, you see something that's like, whoa, didn't understand that until now, and it changes your perspective. And I think it's worth saying, because it's apropos for the conversation. And I just happened to randomly turn to a page. I was in a synagogue for an evening prayer, and I had 5 minutes before starting. And you only have 5 minutes, you don't get too involved in something. So I just took up a Zohar, and I randomly opened it to a specific page. And the page I happened to turn to was the one where it's talking about Moses' prayer for his sister Miriam after she got leprosy. Right, and in Hebrew, it's like it doesn't mention her name at all. So the rabbis have asked, why didn't he simply say, well, we all say we're all so quick to run to synagogue and to run to the bima and give the name of a sick person, so their name is mentioned. In our own prayers, we mention names, and here's Moses with a direct connection to God, praying for his sister. It doesn't even mention her name. So some say he didn't want to make it too long. We do it all the time, right? Some say because of nepotism, you want to make it seem like he cared more for her than other people. The Zohar says completely different. The Zohar says because he wasn't praying for God, for Miriam at all. He wasn't praying for Miriam. The La, which means her, in the verse, is talking about the divine presence, the Shekhinah. Moshe understood how the world worked. Moshe knew that if Miriam was sick, it was because the divine presence was not able to give her the kind of light it wants to give to make us healthy and successful. And that's painful for the Shekhinah. As long as the divine, we may be having a blast in this world. Temple? What temple? Who needs a temple? I have Chinese restaurants. I have fancy clothing. I have phones that can do phenomenal, flips through hoops and all that. And it's like, what a world we live in. Temple? Yeah, one day, God willing, we'll see a temple. Be nice, who needs a temple? Divine presence? Yeah, it can do whatever it wants. But in the meantime, we're okay, right? And Moses said no. He said, every time the world's not the way it's supposed to be, the divine presence is in pain. All the time, suffering. And if you're not sensitive to that, it's like someone coming home and his brother broke his leg and he's lying there on the sofa, grimacing in pain and taking painkillers and all that. And the other brother comes and says, "Guess what? I had the best day in the world. I got to play sports." It's like, it's your brother.
Leave me alone.
It's like, what are you doing? Be sensitive to your brother. He's suffering, and you're talking. Okay, fine. I'm happy to, So like the divine presence is in pain, and we're having a good time. And no, it's like it's not. So Moses understood that I have to fix the divine presence, and I want to fix Miriam, because once I do that, then the light will flow to Miriam, and she'll have a complete recovery. That's one of the reasons why so often we pray for people, we don't get what we ask for. We're praying for the wrong person. We're praying for the wrong thing. This person is not well because the divine presence for some reason is prevented from giving over the light, the bounty, the blessing that it lives to give to us. So fix that.
Okay. What is the reason for that right now? What is the cure for that? Somebody's been asking in one way or another throughout this call in the chat. Is what's happening an out projection of where we are? If we were different, would things be different? I think the answer is obviously yes, but if you can be more specific with it, you're speaking to the idea of prophecies, right? That for prophecies to come out a certain way, we have to be a certain way. What is that way?
Well, I'll tell you, to be honest, once upon a time, that's the way I thought too. Yeah. But in the course of the last 25, 30 years, they kind of indicate, like I said at the beginning, in fact, that there's the Medrash itself on the book Koheles, which is Ecclesiastes in English, but it talks about how there had to be a flood, there had to be a Noah, there had to be an Abraham, there had to be a Akedah, there had to be a Hamad, there had to be a Mordechai. All the things that seem to just happen because we weren't doing the right thing, or but it was like you look at it.
We had to not be doing the right thing. You're saying,
the same way also is that look at, for example, the country was very divided between left and right before all this happened. And the left, was very adamant and doing things that were shocking for, to say that you're not my brother, a fellow Jew, it's very hard, right? And you're angry. How could you do that? But then you think back to yourself, you say, well, let's take a look at their family life. They probably grew up in a family that didn't have any respect for Torah because they were educated that way by people who came from communist Russia, who didn't have and you chase it all back, and all of a sudden you can find reasons for why the people are where they are. Sometimes you have no choice. The first thing they do when someone does something weird or dangerous is like what happened in his childhood that caused him to do this kind of a thing, because normal people don't do that. So yeah, everything we do is cause and effects. God is running things, but there's a certain amount you see even in personal life, how sometimes you do things to succeed, you did everything right, and it still didn't work out. And there's times when you make mistakes and you should fail, and somehow you succeed. Why is that?
I guess it
Why
fits
is that?
into the cosmic plan, but does
Yeah.
that not contradict what you said before, that the Shekhinah is always deeply longing to give us everything that we sincerely desire?
Yeah. It would seem to contradict it, except for one thing, that we know that God plays a role for us. Just like, for example, does God ever get angry? Does God ever get jealous? Really? Does all
Right.
these things we ascribe to him, right? Does he ever do these things? He's completely in control of the situation, never loses control of it. All these things we talk about, but he does it anyhow. He plays these roles because somehow that facilitates our use of free will. And whatever's going to happen historically is destined to happen. It's been happening, and there hasn't been much, like, for example, how did it even come into the country like that in the first place? We're a country with a security system because we live in a bad neighborhood. We live in a rough neighborhood, right? And therefore we have high level of security that we export to the rest of the world because we're such experts in advanced real response,
Right.
divine providence. That's the only explanation.
Of course, it couldn't happen without Hashem allowing it. But then I heard somewhere a thought that maybe the prophecies about Jerusalem, how half of Jerusalem will be captured, etc., moved and became, not that it's less painful in its essence, but maybe in its breadth, smaller. Like, we move things around through our, you can't say that, I think you can't say that we don't change reality through our thought, speech, and action, because the Torah is all over the fact that we do. Maybe certain things have to happen, but not necessarily in certain ways. Yes, no?
Well, we do say that, but I think the best example is when Moses is told to build the tabernacle, right? The Jewish people bring everything, they lay it by his feet, all the beams, all the sockets, all the implements, and they bring it all to Moses, and they say, Moses, we wanted to assemble it, we couldn't do it. And Moses turns to God and says to God, he says, they couldn't assemble it, so now what? So God says, you do it. And Moses says, if 600,000 men between 20 and 60 couldn't put together the tabernacle, how is it possible that I can do it? So God says, you're not going to do it. I'm going to do it, but you just look like you're doing it, and I'll give you the merit as if you built it. That's what Rashi says. And people read that Rashi year after year after year and don't take to heart what the message is. You think it only applied to the tabernacle? It applies to every aspect of life. We think we're doing stuff. We think that we're making it happen, right? But that's not the issue. Success, kol b'dei shemayim chutz mir shemayim. The Talmud says everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of God. That's the only place that we make a difference, is in the fear of God, which means the seeing of God and the revealing of God to the world. That's where we make a difference. God says to every individual, listen, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. What role do you want to play? That's your free will choice. Whether a person's going to get sick, whether a person's going to die, whether there's going to be attacked, whether they're going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, the right place at the right time. It's all part of this master plan that God has for creation. But the question is, I can, through my choices, develop myself into the kind of person where God can plug into a good thing or into a bad thing. Either or.
So are you saying something like the law of building a fence around your roof, because if somebody's going to fall, they shouldn't fall from your roof?
Yes.
That's what you're saying?
Yes. Because if a person destined to fall, they're going to fall anyhow. They're going to fall anyhow. If they're meant to break their neck, God forbid, it's going to happen anyhow. Do you want to be the one that's responsible for that? Do you want to be the one that God chose to use for that? No. So
it's a very subtle point, right? Because if you were destined to have someone fall from your roof, wouldn't they fall from your roof? The halakha is implying no.
You don't have to go so far. It is a good question, right? And it's worthy of another discussion, which is much longer. But you don't. Is that everybody's got the same mitzvah to build a parapet around their roof, right? If I say to myself, who's ever going to go? I mean, in Telstone, where I live here, right? Buildings have these guardrails
it's
like
all
that.
over
Yeah,
Israel. Yeah,
and a person could say, who's ever going to go to my? How many times have people said, "Wow, I never thought that was going to happen," and it happened. We have a rule in our family that basically, if something's meant to happen, it's going to happen. If you think about something might possibly happening, deal with it, right? Don't say, what are the odds of that actually happening? Because so often we have seen that the odds are so against it and it happened anyhow.
Right.
Because when God is it could be 1 billion to 1, but if God's the one, it's going to happen anyhow.
We're seeing that so much lately, the last few years. But it seems to me that what you're really saying is something very subtle that speaks to the question of, divine providence versus free choice, that and God, and the fact that God is above time and all times at once. It seems that we are deciding in concert, we're deciding together, we're deciding to live into the destiny that is planned for us in the best possible way. And what we decided was already foreseen and built into reality. And yet we decide. Is that true? That sounds very fatalistic.
Well,
like you said, you learned how. What I really sorry.
It may sound it, but it's not. One thing that's very important to point out when it comes to these type of discussions is that one of the reasons we have problems with it, because it's not logical to us how that could be the case. What you just said would seem illogical to us, right? A person could argue, and this has been, rabbis have made this point before, right? Nefesh HaChaim talks about this in his book as well as his work. A person could argue to God on the day of judgment and say, God, listen, between you and I, we both know that no one lives unless you want them to live, and no one dies unless back of his car, so why, this free will wasn't an issue in the end,
right?
And so why should I be punished for it? God's answer back is, he says, that's from your perspective, but if I tell you you have free will and you don't understand how it's possible while I know everything and plan everything, that's a shortcoming of yours. Who says that human beings have all the intelligence necessary to understand God and everything he does and everything he built? What we understand. What he gave to us, he gave to us. But let's face it, God is so incredibly awesome and beyond our comprehension that it's possible that the problem with our logic is not that it's impossible, but just according to our logic, it's impossible.
Right. So you're really saying,
even physicists today, because this James Webb telescope is going to the edge of the universe and discovering things that they had no idea existed, that are contradicting previous scientific theories about how the world came into existence and how it functions. And now for the first time they're wondering, maybe all these laws of physics that we thought were absolutes, maybe just outside the universe, they all break down. Like our logic for the longest time, did not allow for that. But as our knowledge expands and understanding of things, all of a sudden we begin to realize that we're as smart as we are, we're not so smart after all, not compared to God, that's for sure. Yep. So, we could try to put it all together and understand it, but it's kind of a waste of time. It's not even productive. The bottom line is that God runs the world, nothing surprises him. Everything that happens is on his radar. He's taking care of it, and there's no mistakes. Everything is being expedited towards the ultimate goal. That's God. From our perspective, we have free will. We have choices. We can choose to be good. We can choose to be bad. We can choose to be truthful. We can choose to be false. Everything will be evaluated based upon the opportunities that were given to us to accomplish. One person's greatness may be somebody else's not such greatness, because they had more to work with. So how does it all work? I don't know. Honestly, there's gaps in my knowledge, but that's okay. Because God says I have free will, that's good enough for me. God says I'll be rewarded for my good choices, it's good enough for me.
So I'm just repeating what I think you said before, that those who plug in the proper way to use what we have for the good will have protection in a general sense. Obviously, everybody's divine providence is specific, but you did say that, right? You said the people who will be standing are the ones who believe, who reveal the truth, who stand for the truth.
Yeah. I mean, some people have lifespans that might naturally just end because that's as long as you're meant to live from the time they were born, and they may die, before Messiah comes and brings the world. But that's just because, and it was just orchestrated by God that it happened in this way, and that it looks like it only happened because of 35 people get in a car crash, God forbid, and some people die, some people get injured.
Yeah.
There's no accidents there. Everyone was meant to be there, and that was meant from the longest time. But this is the way God orchestrated for the sake of free will again. He's very talented that way.
So God has certain things he has to have happen. That's what you're saying. But who participates in what role? That is our free will, even if God foresees it.
Yeah, it's like a play, right?
Yeah.
Where you have the person writes the play. He's got a screenplay, right? He's got names of characters, but not necessarily names of actors, right? And then the producer, director, whatever, they start looking at portfolios and calling in people who have played these parts in the past, and somebody who they audition, and through the audition, they can either get the part or not get the part, or this part, that part, and that's what's going on. He's got a master plan for creation. There's all kinds of roles available. We have to decide what role we want to play based upon our opportunities that he gives to us. And we either rise to the occasion or we don't. And here's an important part, because clearly from the Zohar, from Kabbalah, it's clear that no matter how bad the situation becomes, and it shouldn't become any worse than it is right now, but no matter how bad it comes, that it's possible still to rise above it. It's possible to be outside of it. The Zohar talks about this.
What does it say specifically?
It does.
I'm very interested in this.
But I believe when it says, it means that you have to have. I mean, essentially, it says that anybody who eats from the tree of life will rise above it, and anybody who eats from the tree of knowledge of good and evil will have to go through it. And that can mean even people learning Gemara, Talmud, and things like that. It's not like so what does that actually mean? So if you understand what these represent, so the tree of life means that kind of perspective where you see God in everything. It's like just clear, no matter what's going on. You're not fooled by the news. I mean, I stopped watching the news basically because it just drags you down. It's like yes. I'm like reaching into the cloud and pulling out the stragglers. It's like literally, every time someone tells me, I get all upset. And I hear something that's stupid, and then it makes me all frustrated and all. It's like, and it distracts you. It takes me a while to recover, to be able to say, oh, that's God.
Yes.
But I was fooled in the meantime because my emotions and this and and if you have that mistaken view of reality, it takes you too long to discover God and all that's going on, then that will deny you the type of protection from what we call the birth pangs of Messiah, right, that you want. But if a person works on themselves, this is what you have to work on. And it's not going to work if you're going to lie to yourself. It's not going to work if you're going to let your emotions guide you and avoid the truth. A person has to cling to the absolute truth as much as possible. And that's the best protection we have.
Wow. What about the land of Israel? Two pretty core questions on that. One is I've from a number of different places, but without a tremendous amount of understanding that the settlement of Eretz Israel, the resettlement that's happening now, has to happen in two stages, one secular and one more Torah-based. I think the Vilna Gaon maybe talked about it, maybe other sources, Pekida and Zechira, whatever it is. And the other one is, what do you feel is the role of Aliyah, and does it also apply to non-Jews like Noachites? Does the providence of those, for those who will remain standing, apply wherever you are? What's your thought on those things?
Everybody, well, the answer to the first question is that I don't think the Vilna Gaon says it has to be that way, but it's more like that's the way it's been working. There's the same way, for example, in 1948, you needed secular people seemingly to build the infrastructure of this country. Right. It would have been supernatural for the Torah world to have taken care of all those draining of the swamps and right. smuggling in, supplies and making agreements with Germany and fighting the wars and all that. right? That's not the role that we normally play. Other people seem to have to do that, and that's what happened in the end. So, people have a difficult time, believing that God would ever set it up that way. How could a secular Jew be involved in such a holy task? Well, that's nothing new in Jewish history. Jewish history is so convoluted. If you go back through all of history, you have Yehuda and Tamar, you have Rus, the story of Rus and Lot, his daughters, and countless examples of where Joseph and his brothers who like that's Jewish. On the contrary, if you know Jewish history, it's just the other way around. You have to ask yourself, now, how is God doing this through subterfuge right now? How is he convoluting history as I'm sitting here right now? Where we got this idea that Jewish history is black and white, straightforward, I don't know. It's Bible. More like thinking than anything else, but it's just not the reality of it. Second of all, is that, for example, Koresh, Cyrus, the Gemara says, the Talmud says, that Cyrus, who was a Persian king, he was a Gentile Persian king, who basically, he was appointed by God, not directly, but God used him to allow the Jews to go back after 52 years in exile and begin reconstruction of the temple. An incredible thing. And the Vilna Gaon says, interesting enough, very interesting, is that this is the way redemption has to work if we don't merit to do it the direct way, which means massive repentance and return to Torah and getting it all right. Then it just happens the straightforward way. The whole world says, yeah, you're the Jewish people, God supports you, and let's all get the world to where it's supposed to be. That's the ideal way, but that's not the way it seems to happen. And when it doesn't happen that way, he says you have to have the agreement of the nations of the world that you should get the land back again. And he learns it out from Cyrus, that Cyrus had to send us back. And who needs the UN? Who needs the UN? So they voted for it. Big deal. It's our land anyhow. Turns out that's not true. Turns out that the Brisker Rav was famous for saying that was one of the main reasons why the UN came into existence in the first place, was just for that vote. Because God knows ever since then they haven't been so useful. Certainly not in terms of protecting the Jewish people. When Egypt went to war in the 60s, they just packed up and left.
So it's no longer the UN.
Yeah, but you just see how
played a role.
It's weird, convoluted. That's Jewish history, right? And you just got to work with it the best you can, do whatever you can to try to make it as smooth as possible. And God helps you a lot. There's a lot of just look what's gone on in this country the last 75 years is absolutely remarkable, absolutely remarkable. It's beyond comprehension if you sit down to think about it and appreciate what has happened while trying to fight for survival. Again, that's God. That's God preparing the Jewish people for the final redemption, right? But it happened. It's kind of the Vilna Gaon calls it we have two Mashiachs, right? Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David.
I was going to ask you about that. Yes.
So
what is that?
One from the Mashiach ben Yosef, he says, it can be a person, but it's also kind of like a spiritual force. And he says it's a mixture of nature and miracles combined together. So there's a side of it where you say that's a miracle, but there's also a side you say, yeah, but maybe that's natural. And it doesn't happen very often, and it almost never happens, but it can happen, naturally speaking. So maybe here's where it happened, right? It's like they talk about this one carbon atom, if I remember correctly, from Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, right? There's one atom that had to exist for one period of history, for all of existence to exist, and it did. And then it disappeared, but it wasn't necessary anymore. But if it didn't exist when it did, none of this could ever exist. So scientists are asking, was that a miracle? Is that the designer principle? Or was it that it was a fluke and we're just the world to see it because we're the fluke? So it's like, wow. It's like it could have been natural and there's an explanation for why it happened and why we're here. Or was it a thing that should have happened and really was a miracle, and that's God? Like the same type of a thing where it depends upon your perspective and what you believe, and that's where your free will comes in, developing your perspective and what you believe, so that when you do look at the world, right, then you can see the truth. Well,
as the deeper you connect to Hasidus, Torah, whatever, your own inner deep inner being, the more you start to realize that nothing's natural anyway.
Yeah,
Which would
that's
be
very
the easiest way to
Well, it's very important.
distinguish.
I mean, 'cause that's the truth, is that all the information does exist inside of us. It's the sensitivity. It's the spiritual sensitivity. You know, the number one thing Amalek comes to do is desensitize a person to the reality of God. That's his number one thing. That's
Fear
it.
and anger,
Anyway,
probably.
it could be technology. It could be, you know, it can be a Holocaust. It can be all kind, whatever works in that generation. And our goal, our job, is to resensitize ourselves. The Torah was given to man, to the Jewish people, and to mankind, because we're supposed to, you know, distill it for the rest of mankind too, right? That it was given to us to spiritually sensitize us, to give us the capacity to be able to see the truth. There you have it.
So how do you see, have I asked this already? I'm back at it if I did. How, based on your understanding of history and how history repeats in the end times, you said, so first of all, you said you used to see that we can have direct influence. Now you see it in a much more subtle way. Then you said that may it not get worse than it is right now. We hope that this is the worst it's going to get. So how do you see the potential for things unfolding in terms of what you understand about God's plan, about the play that has to play out, and where the end goal is? How do you see the possibilities, and how do you see our role, Jew and non-Jew? Also, somebody said you didn't answer the question about Aliyah.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw
okay.
that. You know, it's hard when you don't know the people you're talking to.
Yeah.
You know, you tried everything I've said tonight. I've tried to temper my words in a way that I can answer the question as much as possible without hopefully, you know, causing anybody any extra consternation. You know,
Yeah. Well, there are people all over the world. That we know, because a lot of them said hi from various places.
Yeah, but you see in terms of the question of Aliyah, right? It's a merit. It's a tremendous merit to be here at the end of history. Tremendous merit that I don't think that everybody has. We see that through history, right? We see that just, for example, like, you know, even by the Holocaust, people got out, people left. I spoke on Thursday to somebody who comes from South Africa, whose grandfather recognized what was going on in 1938 and ran away. Because of that, his family survived, and he's here today. He's making Aliyah himself right now because he sees what's going on in the world. You know, it's like, but when I look at it, and that when I grew up hating, right? I didn't hate it in the beginning, but when I went to visit Israel, my 14th year of life, after my bar mitzvah, I hated the place. I would never have imagined ever living here, let alone loving it. Right? When I finally decided to live here, I wasn't married yet. I didn't have a family, didn't have children, didn't have a house, didn't have a mortgage. I just had me, right? So it was just a simple case of try to, you know, build, you know, here. But in North America today, I have friends whose families have grown up, and now they even have grandchildren, and people bought houses and mortgages, and, you know, they got businesses and all that. And I'm very, very sympathetic, because I can't begin to imagine how much. I know it takes at least 2 to 10 years to make proper Aliyah, you know, on your own terms. 2 years just to get ready, you know, to do it, and years to prepare in advance of that. And now to have to do it so quickly, coronavirus kind of shook us up a bit, because all of a sudden showed us how quickly, you know, the opportunity to travel can be just swallowed up like that. The truth is, we saw that already by the World Trade Center, but you know, more internationally through Corona and the war going on right now. And you see that God in 2 seconds just shuts doors, and that's it. You thought you had time, you didn't have. Lots of people in Europe that they had time, they didn't have in the end. I don't, you know, I'm not going to try to answer all, you know, all the issues, all the questions, because I don't have the answers. I really don't have the answers. I don't know everything that God has planned, and why this person, because, you know, in the beginning, I used to ask about myself, why did I become religious later on in life when others did not? Why did I move to Israel when others did not? And when it came down to it, I really couldn't find anything special about myself to hang my hat on. For some reason, God did it. Maybe a grandmother in heaven from, you know, 2 generations. I don't know. Why am I in Israel? Why do I love it so much? Why, I don't know. It's just something inside of me. All I can do is be grateful that I have that, and I'm here. That's all I have. That's all I
And
have. So other people, I see that what they're up against, what their mindset is. So what can we do then? Oh, we're back to the same issue, right? Whether a person can make Aliyah or not comes down to halachic realities. It comes down to a lot of different things. It comes down to there's a lot of heavenly help necessary to make it properly. That family should work out and all that. But one thing that God doesn't touch, one thing that is it's on you basically, is how much you yearn to do it. How much, if I could get it all right, I want to be there. There are people who will tell you, you meet them, there's no, King David, kiratzu avdech esavneha. Your servants want her stones. They cherish it. It's the drive. It's in their. It's on their mind. It's their mindset. Everything revolves around it, and that can count for so much, right? So you have to want to make Aliyah. You have to really want it with everything you have. You have to understand that Israel is the best place to be a Jew. Now, as far as B'nai Noach goes, it doesn't have to be. B'nai Noach does not have any mitzvah to make Aliyah to come there to Israel. They have an obligation to be a B'nai Noach wherever they are in the world, in their own country. We acknowledge that they're different. Not only that, but it's even mentioned in Kabbalah that in the Messianic era, the rest of the world will rise to the level of holiness of Israel.
right.
Israel itself, people are, oh, good, so I can stay. No. No. That's not what it says. Israel will rise to the level of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem will rise to the level of the Temple Mount. And the Temple Mount will be otherworldly completely. It just will be like so everything goes up. You'll always have an obligation as a Jew to live in there, to live in Israel. So this is what I've always told people for years. I'm sure we spoke about the last time too, right? It's interesting after all the years of my learning and all that I've seen and changed and all that, I've not moved from this particular position, and that is that you have to want it with all your life, because this is the place that all the books, all the sforim, all the experience show is this is God's land. This is where He chose to connect. He says in Leviticus, in Parshas Bahar, right? He says, "I took you out of Canaan so I took you out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, to bring you to the land of Canaan to be your God." And the Talmud learns very specifically. It's very hard, not hard for God, but He doesn't want to be our God in the diaspora. That's not where He wants to connect to the Jewish people. And if your desire is to be connected to the master of the universe, Israel's the place you do it. So that's why when the spies rejected the land, God says they rejected me. They rejected me. Because when you reject the land, you reject a higher level of relationship with God. So have situations they have to deal with. But God says, fine. So you couldn't physically carry it out. You couldn't technically, you even were afraid to go. But why did you not yearn for it? If you didn't want it, why didn't you want to want it? And if you didn't want to want it, so why didn't you want to want it? Etc., etc. But the want has to be in there from the very beginning. That's a position a person puts himself into, and God looks at it and says, well, they're going the right direction. And then He evaluates them based upon what they can and couldn't do. And then there's personal, judgment and things like that. But at least a person who's doing that, so this idea of saying, nah, I don't have to yearn to do that until Mashiach comes. No such thing. No such thing. In fact, the rabbis point out that any Jew who rejects Israel today is simply carrying on the sin of the spies.
Wow, that's intense. But then there's the aspect, as you've been saying, of where is God going to plug you in? And that's why I think before I ever met you or ever talked to you, we corresponded. One time I asked you about the Rebbe's position, because the Rebbe many times told people not to move to Israel when they wanted to because they had a shlichus. So that was his primary, although obviously, he was incredible supporter of Israel in every aspect and settling every inch of the land, and we're all going to be there. So I just want to make space, if you agree with this, I want to make space for the possibility that people are doing their job where they are. Even though I'm hearing what you're saying, that even though it's foreign and it seems scary, or it's hard to make a living, or whatever people might feel, there should be a feeling of sadness that you can't, or a feeling of desire to be able to. I love that you said to want, because that just means that you're connected to reality.
Right.
You're connected to God's reality.
You know, when you know, there's an obligation to learn on a Jewish male above bar mitzvah to learn Torah every opportunity they can. 20, whatever physically they can do it, as much as possible the entire time. But listen, the reality set in. A person gets married, they earn a living and take care of family, and some people have the merit to learn full time, and other people don't. And it's complicated. Some people want to work. Some people it's just very hard for them to sit there the whole day and learn Torah, right? So people ask the question: when do you know that you can get up and go do something else? When do you know that you're just not running away from a mitzvah you should be doing? How do you know? So the answer I got back once was actually, a great answer that clarified. You don't always get answers that are so clear, and the answer was that whatever you decide to do, and wherever you decide to go, it has to be that you're being dragged out of the study hall by wild horses. In other words, you really want to stay. You know this is where you belong. But some other obligations yanking you out, it's pulling you out. Don't go because you're running away. Don't go because I can't wait to get out of this place. That's not good. No. And if you don't have that, at least acknowledge you should have that. So you can say to God and say, listen, you and I both know I can't wait to get out of this place. But I sure wish I didn't feel that way.
Wow.
I sure wish that I wanted to stay. And that's a step in the right direction. That's all part of free will and making choices. So again, like I saw someone flash that you might want to make Aliyah, but it's not always possible. Well, that's what we're saying. I know that. We all know that, and it might not be a person's destiny until before, clearly from the sources, there are people who make Aliyah before Mashiach comes, and there are people who make Aliyah after Mashiach comes. We know that. There are sources. It says that, right? So it's a big merit, however, to come before, and if that's not the person's merit for whatever reason, then they'll come after, right? But again, one thing that's consistent the whole way through: what is your desire? What is your yearning? Where is your heart? Because that's we know that wherever the heart goes, that's where the person goes.
You're painting really one picture, and that is, what is your true will? It's not even what is your true will, it is, but what is the world that you are seeking to see? What is the reality you're seeking to see and connect to? Is it the one out there in the human life, the this, that, and the other thing that happens in the world, that the world runs on? Or is it God's reality? Really, that's the one bringing in all these.
If you want to get really philosophical about it, the way I look at it is that who are you in essence? Because that's the bottom line. Everybody has an essence to them, and the amazing thing is almost everyone's essence is great, is good.
Yeah.
Right. Jew, everyone's in essence. You see this. It comes out. In Christ a lot of time, but the essence is good. What happens is in the course of life, you're born into this world as an essence, and then as you start to grow up, your parents start putting layers on top of you. And I'm talking about clothing, right? And then your friends start putting layers, and your teachers put layers on, and the media puts layers on, and that essence gets crushed. Every Rosh Hashanah is supposed to be an opportunity to pull off all the layers and get down to the essence of who you are, and that's why Simchas Torah is supposed to be such a joyous time. Shmir Seres and Sukkot is supposed to be such a joyous time, because hopefully by Yom Kippur we've gotten down to the essence of who you are. Because you should know there's nothing greater in life than being who you are in essence. So free will is the means to do that. But when you talk about your essential will, means like, who are you in essence? Like, figure that out. That's what you have to get to. And when you do, it's amazing how powerful a person you become because of it.
Doesn't it go hand in hand with figuring out what actually is the essence of everything? I mean, our essence
that's already, yes, absolutely, for sure. But let's start personal. Let's start with what's more tangible, and that is, who are we in essence? Because most it's amazing, but most people in this planet of almost 8 billion people, last I knew, right, are walking around being not themselves. They are a conglomerate.
Almost all of us.
So many different points of views and things. Most people are being what they think they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to be perceived. You can tell when someone is being their essence. They're just so themselves. They're just so relaxed. They're just so, personally strong. Nothing, influences them in a way that shouldn't. They know who they are, and that's the most empowering thing a person can have in life.
Yeah, that's the ultimate definition of awakening, I think.
Yeah.
Who we really are. Okay, I know we're almost at the top of the hour, but do you have anything to say about what's going on in the world, like the madness that is popping up on campuses or in the streets of large cities or whatever? What do you think about all of that?
So this is what I was kind of like hitting to the beginning, trying to indicate that all of this, as we talk about redemption, and redemption is compared to the rising of the morning star, the morning sun, right? And Kabbalah explains that it's always darkest before the day. The darkest point of the night is right before it starts to become day again. That's the darkest point. And you need that as a foil to contrast, right? You need all this. One of the biggest proofs that we have that we're moments away from the final redemption, moments away. There is so much falsehood and so much confusion. It's, I thought, going back to when Trump was president and the whole thing with the false news and what people were saying, and I thought, wow, that's way worse than I've experienced in my entire lifetime. I sure it doesn't get worse than that. Lo and behold, a couple of years later, it does, and it's keep going that way. And it's like my brain. It's like you can't fathom it, but you have to realize this is exactly what is predicted. This confusion, this darkness, is in preparation for the big burst of light, the big burst of Deya, of Das. God says, I will fill the world with godly knowledge. That's what's coming next. But that's not going to be able to have its effect unless the world first goes that way. And that's what's happened. We're reaching rock bottom. We're reaching the bottom of the whole thing. It's about to turn around.
Amen. Which brings me back to the question I asked before we interrupted with repeating about Aliyah. How do you see this in the context of everything that's been discussed? How do you see things moving forward, given that we don't know? But I know that you think about it.
If I were to write a book?
Yes. What a novel idea.
Yeah. It would be my fourth one on a messianic take on history.
Right, I know.
No, I think that the war of Gog and Magog will take place. It will happen.
And
the prophets talk about it. The books I've read talk about it. It seems to be, but contrary to what people think, the war of Gog and Magog is not really a war meant to be against the Jewish people. They will think it's meant to be against Jewish people. They think that's what. But the main point of the war of Gog and Magog is to bring together. We see this by the time of Sennacherib II, who was the king of Assyria. The Chizkiah Melech, the righteous, Chizkiah Melech, he assembled 185,000, not soldiers, like units, made up of what would have been the United Nations at that time. He took from all the nations of Asia and at that time and brought them together and surrounded Jerusalem, which is one of the key points of the war of Gog and Magog. They come against Jerusalem, Mashiach, and Jerusalem. And what happens in the end is God. It's like bowling. God hits the center pin. And they all fall down. Like overnight, while Chizkiah is sleeping, as an expression of his trust in God, he believes that God will protect him, a plague breaks out that night and wipes out almost all the troops. And Sennacherib ends up assassinated by his own sons. He has to escape and hide himself because he just killed off the prime sons and soldiers of so many different nations around. And eventually his sons catch him, and they assassinate him, and that's the end of Sennacherib. So he came in like one moment, like the leader of a massive army, like the antithesis of the Jewish people in Chizkiah, and then he's gone just like that. That's what the war of Gog and Magog is for. It's to bring together all the enemies of God and truth. Wipe out, first stage of getting rid of the evil from the world. And then after that, they'll want to turn against the Jewish people. That'll be the next thing on their agenda. But that's when all the miracles are going to start to happen. And we're just going to, everything that we rely upon is fail. Because God wants it to be 100% clear, like in Egypt, that he's the only one who's always been saving our necks. He's the only one. No more room for doubt. No more room for confusion. Everybody's going to see it. There'll be not one person left at that time is going to have any question about it. And that's why free will goes poof. It disappears. Because that'll be that promised revelation of God and truth in history. And like I said, it's outside the box. There's nothing that we've gone through in our own personal lives that can really truly prepare us for such a moment. It's all theoretical, but you have to believe.
Wow. Okay. I guess this is as good a note as any to pause on. Thank you so much. I have so many more questions, but I know we don't have so much more time. I really, really appreciate your coming and sharing with us.
I got a holistic questions myself too.
Yeah. Wow. So Gog and Magog does not have to. I actually read somewhere. I don't remember the sources, but I read that that the prophesied war with Iran, if that's figuring in, is not with Israel.
No.
So
they will want it to be against Israel, but it's going to be all part of. We're in
Edom versus Paras. I read.
There's a lot of there's contrary sources and different things are being said, so it's really hard to know for sure. But one thing is for certain, that God's not out to destroy the Jewish people for sure. If anything, he wants as many people as possible to be around. He wants us to see his chesed. He wants us to see his mercy, right? But you have to earn the right to see that. You have to stick with him in the end, and that's what's going on. We're reaching the end, and in the book of Job, right? I should have mentioned this earlier, just it came to my mind now, but it's really the perfect ending to the entire thing. And that is the book of Job, when he complains to God, and then God gives him what for? Because he did. So God says, has there been any God who ever picked up the world from the four corners and shook it out like a dirty garment? And Rashi says, what's that talking about? Rashi says, at the end of days, God, so to speak, will pick up the world and shake out all the evil people from the world.
Wow.
To pick up the globe, and shake it all back and forth. Like, what does it mean? It happens one way. He's going to test us. Emunah is what we hang on with. Faith in God, faith in the process. That's what we hang on with, right? And if a person is prepared for that, that's what we want to do. That's what we're trying to do. Wow. So that's it. That's a good note to leave on. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, you can see them shaking out into the news. And it's so amazing. Okay, thank you so much. And may we have incredible, miraculous,
Amen,
unbelievable news to share, everybody.
Hey, the next time you do the show, we'll be talking about the Messianic year because we'll be living inside of it.
Amen.
And looking back on everything and saying, wow, didn't see that coming.
Right. Filling in the gaps.
Yeah.
That should be fun. More books. Yeah. Okay. Take care, everybody. See you tomorrow. Thank you so much, Rabbi Winston.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.